I just really, for anybody who would want to do this, the one point I would make is just put your head down, keep your expenses low, and just go for it. And I truly feel my biggest strength is that I am not the smartest person in the room. I truly am not. And with that comes the desire to learn from people. And once people feel that they are a part of your team and you're a part of their team, people carry you. And that's such a beautiful thing.
Welcome, everybody, today to another episode of the Business of Better podcast with Dr. John Chuback, where we talk about all things medically related and entrepreneurially related. And today I have a very special guest, a dear friend and an old friend, Dr. Sanjiv Lakhanpal. Dr. Lakhanpal and I have a lot in common with our professional backgrounds and personal backgrounds. And it's my great pleasure to invite him to the show. Dr. Sanjiv Lakhanpal, welcome to the Business of Better.
Thank you, John. Thank you so much. And it truly is a privilege, and the pleasure is all mine. Looking forward to the show.
Thank you so much. So, Sanjiv, for our viewers, give us a little bit about your background prior to CVR. Tell us a little bit about your personal background and education.
Well, I was born in India, went through my early education all the way up to medical school in India, then had the privilege to move to the United States and did my general surgery here, did my cardiac surgery residency at the University of Minnesota, and then started as a cardiac surgeon in the greater Washington, D.C. area. And from there, I moved into the field of venous insufficiency after practicing cardiac surgery full-time for about 20 years. And here we are, John.
It's an amazing story, and I'm sure just on that piece of the story we could write a book. And something tells me that book is probably coming. So Sanjiv, you're a successful cardiac surgeon practicing in the Mid-Atlantic region, doing very well. How did you first come to make that switch from open heart surgery to the world of venous insufficiency and vein care?
So I don't know, John, if we've talked about it, just you and I, but like most of us, I had a challenge, yet an opportunity. The challenge at that time was that hospitals were acquiring medical practices, more specifically cardiac surgical practices. And I just did not have it in me to work for a hospital. So I had that entrepreneurial bone that I wanted to keep doing something on my own. And that truly was one of the key reasons even to move to the United States. So as one door closed where most cardiac surgeons were now having to work for, and nothing wrong with that, it's just it wasn't for me, were working for larger hospitals, this other door opened where we could practice something which was really needed, that is patients suffering from diseases of the venous system. It was seriously undertreated at that time. And then to just fit completely, this is something that could be treated in an outpatient setting where we could then, without the support of a large hospital system, we could get into it ourselves and gradually control our own destinies by managing these centers ourselves. And that was just a perfect way to get into the field of venous insufficiency for me.
How did you get your original training?
For the field of venous insufficiency?
Correct.
You know, fortunately in the field of medicine, there are always great people who would just invite you that, Sanjeev, come spend a month with me, spend a day with me. And initially it started with spending a few days. Then I realized, no, I think for anything, you do need the humility that you are, and basically getting into a new field. So you do need to spend a lot of time in training yourself. And I found some great people who were willing to spend time, train me, and about in a year or so, by going there repetitively, I felt pretty well equipped to do this.
Fantastic. So how does one, because the business of better is a podcast about entrepreneurship in medicine, not just for doctors, but anybody involved in the field of medicine. In your case, we both had a background as cardiac surgeons. We both made the transition to vein care, venous insufficiency, office-based. But then there's someone like me who 20 years on is still here in the office, a small practice, one surgeon by himself, a few supporting staff. How is it that another individual, namely yourself, goes from a practitioner in a community setting to someone who creates the Center for Vein Restoration, which now has upward of 110 offices around the United States? How did that come to pass?
So, John, first of all, I don't think you're giving yourself all the credit that is deserved. I mean, you are such an amazing person, and all your viewers know that, right? We all grow in areas wherever we focus our attention to, and for you, it was the stuff that you're doing, all the books that you write, the amazing vein care you provide. So we all choose whatever we want to do, and I really, first and foremost, think that whatever path we choose is the right path. Whatever path we are meant to be in is the right path. Having said that, you did ask me a question, and let me respond to that appropriately. That how would, if somebody's path is that they want to scale, how is that different than being an exceptional surgeon like yourself who is providing amazing care to one's patients? I think it has to start with, first of all, a desire to want to scale. And as now I go around the country and meet a lot of very successful physicians like yourself, everybody does not have that desire, right? But people want to, the desire most of us have is that if I treat X number of patients, I should just do the best for those patients. Within that subset is a group of people who would say, okay, now I want to provide excellent care, but I do want to scale this. And scaling it requires, for different times during your scaling journey, you require different skill sets to learn, and more importantly, different skill sets to unlearn. So a very simple thing is, when you are the surgeon, you're taking care of X number of patients a day, you are focused on providing excellent care yourself, almost to the extent that most successful surgeons I know feel that nobody else can provide that level of detail and that level of care. That's what makes us so special. But in moving to the next step, you have to accept that there are other people who can provide equally good care. And maybe if you're at the 99th percentile, this other person may be at the 98th percentile. But with your training and your ability to mold other people, they will provide as good care. So amongst surgeons, chefs, plumbers, I mean, all of us have a trade, right? That to me is the most important thing to unlearn, which is nobody else can do it as good as me. So let me now delegate not just the management of a clinic, but also the surgical technique or the providing of the surgical therapies to other people. Some of us succeed in that unlearning. Most of us fail in that unlearning. And to me, that is the first key step. The word I was taught early on as a technocrat, or somebody who does things with their hands, has to learn. And then, of course, similar thing then goes to, we all feel that I manage my billing so well, and then having to let go control over that as well to other people. So if I was to say there are the stages of growth will be, first of all, the 0 to 1, from cardiac surgery to vein surgery. Then I would say from 1 to 3, where you can provide direct supervision for the patients. You go to a clinic in the morning, a clinic the next day, a clinic in the afternoon. You're still going to 3 clinics, but you are the main doer. Then the next stage comes where you're kind of a player coach. So you are overseeing other players directly doing the surgery. And then the next stage comes where you are overseeing the managers of the other players. And finally, you got to get to a stage where you have to be the strategic mind. And there's an amazing team of people with you who is working with you and implementing your strategy. And the strategic mind cannot be one person. That's when the role of a board comes in, where people who are all rowing in the same direction, but different wirings, who can row together. A finance guy whose purpose is to provide excellent returns to his investors. That is his dharma. That is what he's there for. A surgeon whose dharma is to provide excellent care to the patients. How do the two of them work together so that all goals can be achieved? Because if you've taken money from the firefighters union or from the teachers union and they've invested in you, it is also the finance guy's role, duty, to give them the right amount of returns. So everybody then rowing together becomes the final stage of an organization in my mind. And then your role becomes to be that mold where everybody can work together and get over their minor differences because they're still rowing in the same direction. Sorry, that was a very long answer, but I tried to be as honest in that as possible.
No, it's fantastic. It gives us some great insight, and so I want to kind of take that whole corpus of information that you provided us with, and again, to use a surgical term, now go back and maybe dissect it piece by piece. In the beginning, did you start a private practice just by yourself doing veins in the community?
Yes, I did.
You did.
I did that while I was still doing cardiac surgery.
Okay.
So at that time, I was doing my own private practice, yes.
Exactly like me. So I started the vein clinic while I was still doing open heart, and then at some point you went full time to veins and you left the cardiac behind.
About 15 years later, but yeah.
Oh, really? Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Long period. So
That
for
was
me,
a long tail.
yeah, for me it was more like 5 or maybe a little longer than that, but it doesn't happen. That's the great lesson, I think, for our listeners to know that it doesn't happen overnight. And one of the adages that I'm fond of, maybe because it reflects my life, others might have a different story, but successful people tend to be long-term thinkers. They are able to see things on a long horizon. And unfortunately, I think we live in a culture now, and maybe that's a global culture, where especially young people are expecting to have extraordinary results right this moment or overnight or in a very short period of time. So I'm glad to hear that it was a process. Now, when you transitioned from a solo practitioner doing veins to going to the next level, did you bring on one associate, one partner? How does stage 2 look, for example?
So before we go into that, I mean, you're very kind in using the word success repetitively. There's a beautiful thing there that using adages, and I know both you and I are fond of those, is that success is the way the world sees you, joy is the way you see yourself. So just the fact that you build 100, 120 clinics is no success, whether you're driving back home joyous or not. That is truly what success is. And by the grace of the Creator, I think both you and I are in a good place there. So that's one thing. How did my journey go? First of all, John, I would be completely lying if I say there was a strategy. Things just fell into place. And that's another thing I know when you teach entrepreneurship, when you do all these things, you don't want to talk about the big X factor, which is luck. And it is an X factor because there's nothing we can do about it, right? Whenever the stars are going to align, they're going to align. We can't wait for them to align. We just keep moving, and if they align, it all works out. So from the first clinic to the second clinic was, yes, there was a physician, Dr. Marquez. He was closer to his retirement phase, and he was like, Sanjiv, if you want to do this, I really don't want to manage my practice, but if you manage my practice, I'll join you. So the key thing was at that time, he was a very accomplished surgeon in the community. I felt he will only add to my reputation, not take anything from my reputation. And I didn't have to oversee him. I didn't have to train him. So we went from 1 to 2. The real next step, so as I was saying, it's giving up control over your surgical excellence is the real next step. And I didn't have to do it going from 1 to 2. But the third person we hired was somebody who he had not done vascular surgery in the past. And, but he was a very good, humble guy who was willing to train. So he came and he trained under me for a while. And it was like basically, if I don't remember right now, but maybe 3 months. And then he started running a second room for me, but under my direct supervision. So this was not a different office. It's just he's in the other room. So if he has trouble accessing, or, again, I use the same analogy for chefs, or like I said, plumbers, chefs, whatever, IT people who want to scale. That imagine you're still in the same building. This person is writing code and he gets stuck somewhere, and you can walk over to the other room and help the person out. So same thing with us, that, hey, he has difficulty having access. You just walk to the other room and you say, okay, here's your access, and you come back and you're running 2 simultaneous rooms. So that is kind of the easy next step. But then the real thing comes when it is a day to let this person fly and open his own clinic under your umbrella. Because that's where a lot of us will hesitate and fail, because now this guy is going to work under your name. And that's where I had a friend like you who told me, Sanjeev, okay, now by that time he'd done about 1,000 procedures with me. Is he not as good as you? I mean, all in your humility want to say, no, he's as good. But accepting that, no, now the guy is good enough and he can go open a place where, again, I would go in the morning and in the evenings make rounds there. And like I said, the next phase is putting a person out of state where you're not even going to go oversee them. And by that time, you should have enough solid data about everybody, and EMRs really helped us with that. I know a lot of our physician colleagues are not fans of EMR, but EMR really helps us standardize procedures, run numbers on everybody. What are the indications they're using? How long did a procedure take? How much vein did they have to treat? How much did they inject? And then you can start looking at data through exceptions where, okay, out of this 50 procedures he did last week, these 4 procedures just don't make sense. And gradually you can manage a larger team.
Amazing. I have as you mentioned, Sanjiv, I've written a few books mostly about personal development and personal achievement, education, and so forth. In one of the books, I talk about a friend, Larry Homsony, whose father, Eddie, was, I believe, a high school graduate from Brooklyn, New York. And he became very well to do in the manufacturing business, manufacturing of bedspreads, in fact, in the days when those things were still done here in the States. Very rare to have that anymore. But in interviewing him for the book, because he was a very successful person, and I'd like to get your reflection on this, he said, John, I have to tell you, starting out, he said, I had one machine and I slept with the machine and I stayed in the factory and I couldn't afford an apartment plus space. So I ran the machine and I repaired the machine and it was me and my machine. He said, and then I wanted to grow. And he said, I have to be honest. He said, it was more difficult for me to go from one machine to two machines than it was for me to go from 100 machines to 200 machines. Does that resonate with you in your experience?
You know, it's absolutely correct. It's because of that. I don't know what his limitation was with the machine. I'm assuming it was not the financing of the machine, but letting somebody else run the machine. And that, just that fear, oh my God, if he doesn't produce something of the same quality that I want to produce. In healthcare, it's the culture. What if we are trying to keep this culture where a patient comes in and feels like family? What if I cannot reproduce that? It is a beautiful, beautiful analogy you give. That is so correct. That, but once you get over that fear and you have the systems to manage outcomes, to manage results, then that fear really goes down.
Yeah. And with our background in cardiac surgery, it's a special experience because it takes a certain degree of ego to do something like cardiac surgery, a sense of self-confidence. And when we think back to our old professors, I know you trained at an amazing place in Minnesota, and I trained at an amazing place in Rochester. And the respect that I know we both have for our mentors who allowed us to operate on the human heart and so forth. But largely that was under direct supervision. So if there were a problem, they could catch you or they could stop you or they could intervene. And little by little, by the time we graduate, more and more and more would be done without direct supervision, but they were always close by. And then there's that moment where they release us out into the society and they have to feel comfortable that Sanjiv and John and everyone else is competent and capable. But generally speaking, there's a big difference, which is you go out on your own or into a different department or a different community, and you're standing on your own 2 feet. They're no longer taking responsibility for your results. And in the system that you built, in a way, as you said, especially early on when you put your name on that, there's a lot of pressure to see that those results are going to stand up to your standards. And so that must have been a tremendous challenge. And the same ego that allows us to do these incredible things, there's a flip side to that ego that I talk to people about all the time, which is there's a fragility to a big ego. And we have difficulty taking criticism, and we certainly have difficulty taking blame for things that may not be completely our fault. So that's why so many surgeons cling to the needle holder and the forceps and the scissor and don't ever want to let it go because God forbid something should go awry. I don't want to be, responsible for that, or certainly falsely associated with that. So I give you tremendous credit for all that you built. So did you have any background in business in terms of your education or formal training prior to this experience?
No. Both my parents were professors in a medical school. Business was never looked at as something good. It just all that mattered was how many papers have you published. So coming from that background, this was a completely different venture for me, and I must say I've really enjoyed every moment of it.
Well, the education must have been enormous. The learning curve had to be extremely steep.
John, obviously, education is enormous, but I just really, for anybody who would want to do this, the one point I would make is just put your head down, keep your expenses low, and just go for it. You've got to know that, you have to recruit people who you can trust because at the end of the day, they will care. And you absolutely have to be paranoid about your reputation because a reputation is based on something real, right? If you can't take people's health lightly, and that is why you have to worry about all the things that you mentioned that our amazing teachers have instilled in us. But those amazing teachers also, so, taking a step back, I feel something you'd alluded to, there is always a negative side to every positive habit, right? It's nothing is all good and nothing truly is all bad. So while we want to be perfection has good sides, but perfection also scales or limits your ability to scale because we were given that idea, rightfully so, that hey, you have to be the best surgeon. So unlearning that again, I know I'm being very repetitive about that, but that is the one key thing somebody can take away, that you have to unlearn that element of ego is one way of looking at it. It becomes our identity. That's why it took me so long to stop doing cardiac surgery because that was my identity. And slowly, gradually taking that away from yourself, it's also very freeing. And as you start feeling that, okay, I've trained 5 other people, if our teachers could let us out in the community, still with their names, you're absolutely right, we were not under the same walls. But if I had turned out to be, or you had turned out to be not a good surgeon, they would have said, hey, this guy trained in Rochester, this guy trained in Minnesota. So those things are important. Yet, if one is going to scale, you have to accept that, other people who are well trained by you can do as good a job as you. And I'm telling you, a good number of people today, I realize, have done a better job than me. It took me a long time to realize that, but it's what we do, whatever field we might do, it's not rocket science. Even rocket science, you talk to a rocket scientist, they say, Sanjiv, I'm just doing little algebra here and there and some geometry. So it's absolutely doable. What the point I was making, do not overspend early. Keep your expenses down. That's again, that becomes attached to our egos. And one of my roles these days is that I go and I look at practices where we can partner with these practices. People who have been successful, in the term that I used about success and joy, but people who have been successful are most importantly people who've kept their expenses low. It's just having a huge palatial office does not help because then so much of your revenue is going into feeding this big giant where you just don't have revenue left to scale. And then once you, at an early stage, get into taking loans to grow, that is the death spiral. So you've got to just stay conservative with what you're spending. And patients really just want empathy. Patients want a clean, kind of aseptic environment. Patients are not looking for whether we have marble or granite in our offices.
Yeah, it's
And
amazing.
people make that mistake over and over again.
Some of the centers that I see being built by colleagues of ours, which I have no criticism. I mean,
Yeah,
everyone does things their own way, but some of these places, they look like the Taj Mahal, really.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
unbelievable. And when I look at how reimbursement is today and so forth, I wonder how in God's name they should ever get that investment back, quite frankly. Let me ask you this. You know, first of all, one of the things you reminded me of one of my favorite adages, which says, "The learners shall inherit the earth." And in order to do that, you have to learn, unlearn, and relearn. And you've been talking about unlearning, but the part you haven't given yourself enough credit for is the relearning. It's leaving the past behind us and the old lessons to continually be relevant and competitive and successful and fruitful in the current environment. And things are changing rapidly. So I know that you're relearning all the time to build a successful program, which is to your credit. The other thing that I wanted to ask you is, as we begin to come near the end of our time together, is if you could share with us, you've given some advice in terms of people who are thinking about scaling or getting into entrepreneurship in general. For example, at Vita Support MD, which I started over 10 years ago, where we create the supplements, as you know, for circulation, in all of those years, I'm proud to say, we never had any debt, we never borrowed any money, we never took any loans. And the business was built out of the till, as they say. As we were successful and profitable and revenue grew, we reinvested in the business. And it was many years before any of the partners, the three of us, took any distribution. So it was good to keep your day job in that regard. But it also goes back to what I said earlier. My experience has been success comes to those who can do long-term thinking and not be in a rush to succeed. So you mentioned that in terms of controlling costs, which I think is brilliant. If you could give our listeners maybe one, if you had any, and you can certainly admit if you haven't, but maybe one mistake you made along the way that you could protect the rest of us from making, and also maybe one decision that you really give yourself great credit for because that was really a terrific move on your part.
So I'm very clear about the big mistake I made early on, and then with the help of people who, like I said earlier, were rowing in the same direction and had a lot of affection for me, with their educating me, I got over it. And that was having been trained surgically, you get a certain style of leadership, which is you look at your superior and you say, tell me what to do, and I'm there. And you look at people who are reporting to you, I'm telling you what to do, just shut up and do it. Okay. And
I'm familiar with that.
okay. So that's how we were all
Rubric,
trained.
yes.
That's how we were all trained. And I was a proud follower of that methodology.
No, it seemed to work very well, right?
Okay. Till you get to a certain stage, right?
Right.
And then I was told that, so, I've had a lot of coaches along the way. And what you said about learning is so true again, that we have to constantly learn. And to learn, you have to stay humble. And to stay humble, you have to know you will rarely ever. For me, I have never been the smartest person in the room. There are a lot of very smart people who are there always. So these coaches, and I know we're short on time, so I'll be quick about it.
No, take your time. We have
This
time.
coach was like, Sanjiv, when you are behaving like that, you are shutting down the people who are reporting to you, and they cannot help you to the level you now need their help. When all that they were doing was passing you the needle driver, even in surgery, right? You and I know that a surgical assistant who is very experienced so many times will save the day. That, hey, doc, why don't you try this thing? That's how Dr. Chuback did it last time. And you say, oh, that's how he did it. I don't like him, but okay, I'll do it. So same thing here. Now you have operations people, you have sales people who have like decades of sales experience. If you're just telling them, shut up and do this, they're going to shut up and do it. But you have lost on that decades of experience that somebody, if you let them open their mouth, that they will be able to tell you. So I think for my first 10 years or so, I behaved the wrong way. And now it is like that adage again that if, as the CEO, you are talking for more than 5% of the times of the board meeting, you're doing something wrong. All these are specialists that you have around you. They should be doing the talking 95% of the times and not you. So I think that's, if you were to say what was the biggest mistake I made, which could have made me, get there even quicker. And probably I would have not hurt the feelings of a lot of good people, would be that. And I truly feel my biggest strength is that I am not the smartest person in the room. I truly am not. And that with that comes the desire to learn from people. And once people feel that they're a part of your team and you're a part of their team, people carry you. And that's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah, these are really wise words, and it's something that many surgeons, myself included, have had to work on very hard over the years. It's one of my favorite things about the Business of Better podcast, and in fact, Maria, who you know, has been with me more than 20 years, and my wife Diane, who's been working in the practice, running the practice for 20 years. One of the things they advised me when it came to this show, and it's been wonderful for me, is I'm not the star of this show. I'm the host of the show. So I do a lot more listening than talking. And it's been a real pleasure to do that, especially having people like yourself with such a tremendous life story and having accomplished what you have. I'm here as a student on the show, not as a teacher so much, as a facilitator. And as the old adage goes, God gave us one mouth and two ears, and that's a lesson that it's taken me a long time to catch
And
up
as
on.
one of these coaches would tell me that, Sanjeev, whenever you have your mouth open, you're not learning.
Yeah, it's very, very true. That brings me to another question, Sanjiv, that I was coming to that, and you preempted me, but I'd like to get a little deeper into that. I was going to ask you, did you have any mentors in this process, any coaches? And you've mentioned them. So tell us about mentorship, coaching, professional business coaching. What experience do you have, and what advice do you have for our listeners in terms of a value add in that regard?
I think they can be very, very helpful. Early on, you need, the listeners, if somebody's interested, they need to find somebody they completely trust. Could be a family member, could be one of your teachers, your former teachers, somebody in the community who's, depending on, if you're seeking business advice or something, you start there. As you go down the path, you then have to identify a very specific coach for a specific field. And like I remember beyond the family coach that I had, an amazing person who taught me the basics of entrepreneurship in very, very simple ways. We don't have the time to go into it. Later on, I started interviewing coaches, and a lot of them who were very accomplished people, to my mind, I didn't find them accomplished. I thought, how are they going to help me? So I had to find someone who, to my taste, was an accomplished person. And then you just have to completely open up in front of them. It's like worse than therapy. If you're going to be all protected and you're not going to open up, then the person is not able to help you. It's like going to a doctor and saying, I'm not going to let you examine me, right? And once you open up in front of somebody who has achieved what you feel you want to achieve, because that's what's going to give you trust in him. And they are invaluable. And see, we all feel that our journeys are unique. They are not. Everybody's gone through the same challenges, or not everybody, but people have gone through the same challenges so many times. And anybody who's been down that path knows what you're thinking already. It's like, when you come home and you think your parents don't know that you've gone out on a date, they will just tell you from the way you smile that how the date went, right? So same thing here, that it's if you find somebody who you trust, open up to them, trust them, and you learn something which would not even otherwise, you would not even think of it. So coaching, I feel, is very, very important, but by the right person.
Beautiful. My last two questions quickly as we wrap up. We could go on forever, as you know. Sanjiv and I love to have deep spiritual and philosophical conversations, and we could go on forever. Today is more practical, and I think it's been very valuable for me and for our listeners. Sanjiv, second to last question. If you could pick one person in the course of history, dead or alive, to sit down and have dinner with and pick their brain, who would that be?
John Chuback.
This is not open mic night at the comedy club, Sanjiv.
I mean that, man. I mean that. Okay, with all the books you've written and the depth of knowledge that you have of philosophy and life, that's what I would choose. I'm not kidding you here.
God bless you. I'm not going to push you on it, but I that makes my heart warm to hear that. Last question. If you could sit down with a 20-year-old Sanjiv Lakhanpal and talk to him and give him some advice, what might you say?
Early on in life, realize that it's truly about acceptance and gratitude. Don't take too long to realize that. Early on in life, realize that you are here to do your best, and you have to leave the outcome to a higher authority. But you have to continue to do your best, and inaction is not a choice. I know those are not the things you were looking for, but that is truly what I would tell the 20-year-old Sanjiv. Don't get stressed about things that you don't have control over, and just focus on your work, your culture, the culture that you want to inculcate into your organization, and just put one foot in front of the other, and good things will continue to happen. And if they don't, just have the acceptance and be grateful for whatever the day is bringing your way.
Beautiful. As we close, I'm going to bring it full circle with something that Sanjiv said several times in today's interview. My favorite, up until very recently, when I personally modified it, one of my favorite quotes about success, or my favorite quote about success in terms of definitions, was by the great 20th century speaker and thinker and educator Earl Nightingale, who said, "Success is the progressive realization of a worthy goal or ideal." And I really loved that. I mean, that really resonated with me. But recently, I modified it slightly, and I think Sanjiv is going to agree because of what he said. And I think that success is the progressive realization of a worthy goal or ideal with joy in your heart. Because you may be doing something worthwhile or redemptive or important, but even then, if, as Sanjiv said, you're driving home at the end of the day and you're miserable and you're angry and you're grumpy and you're frustrated, then your project may be successful, but you can't call yourself a success. I think it's important that we all seek to have joy in our heart. And Sanjiv Lakhanpal, speaking with you, not just today, but every time that we've sat down together and talked, has always, and I mean this sincerely, put joy in my heart. So thank you.
Likewise, John. That feeling is very mutual.
Thank you so much.
That's why, if I have another hour, I'd sit down and talk to you. Okay?
I'm certainly going to invite you back. I'm going to invite you back.
I meant socially.
Of course. Well, that goes without saying.
Great.
So,
Thank you, buddy. Thank you so much.
Everyone, who's listening and watching today at the Business of Better podcast. We thank you for your attention, and it's been my great pleasure, my privilege, and my honor to bring you this very, very special man and doctor and humanitarian and business person, least of all business person, Sanjiv Lakhanpal. Thank you
Thank
for
you, John.
tuning in. Thank
Thank
you,
you very much.
and we'll see
Take
you all
care.
soon. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.